22 teenagers, an abandoned camp, a tense atmosphere, a $100,000 prize. Sounds like a reality show, doesn't it? This is the animated reality show, Total Drama Island. Only one person will be the winner and the others will leaving in shame. We're going to talk about Total Drama Island from beginning to the end. On the dock of shame, Chris, the host, meets the first guests. Gwen, Lindsay, Jeff, Trent, Heather, Duncan, Owen, and the others. Chris tells to them that this is Camp Wawanakwa, where they will be living for the next 8 weeks, and that the people sitting around them will be their mates and possibly even enemies. Suddenly, the deception is revealed, as Chris has invited everyone to an island with a 5-star hotel. But in fact, there is only one cook, a common toilet, and even the food moves around in the plate.
Hello.
Chris greets the participants in the main lodge while they are still eating. Jeff asks if they can order pizza, to which the chief responds aggressively by throwing a cleaver knife at the wall. Chris then announces that the first challenge will begin in an hour. Katie is nervous and asks DJ what he thinks the producers will make them do, and DJ tells her that the first assignment will be easy, but no way. All the members are gathered at the top of the cliff. Chris announces the first challenge of the episode. They must jump off the 300-meter cliff into a safe zone in the lake. The losing team will have to kick out one participant, but no one wants to leave first. As a result of this funny challenge, the Gophers win. At dinner, the Perches try to decide who they will kick out. During the ceremony around the campfire, Chris, holding a plate of souffle, explains that it will be distributed to all members who stay in the game. Anyone who does not receive a souffle will be kicked out and must leave camp. Chris distributes the souffle to Jeff, Tyler, Katie, Bridget, DJ, Harold, Sadie, Duncan. In the final scene, only Courtney and Jezekiel don't receive the souffle and both start to panic. Chris ends up giving the remaining marshmallow to Courtney, and Jezekiel becomes the first contestant eliminated from the competition. Chris suspects that Jezekiel was eliminated for picking his nose, which was caught on camera, and not for his derogatory remarks to the girls. At camp, the Gophers are enjoying a bathtub party, the Perches walk by, and Cody raises a toast to the screaming Gophers. Courtney signals the cameraman to come closer and declares that the Gophers may enjoy their first win, but she will eventually win the competition and the $100,000 prize. Do you believe her? In a new challenge, the two teams compete in a 20-kilometer race and a buffet eating contest. But it turns out that the real challenge for them is the non-sleep-a-thon, in which you have to see who can go the longest without sleep. Owen falls asleep in a cave, and 4 Sasquatch-Anakwas are looking at him. One of them pokes him with a stick, causing him to fart. The smell causes them to throw Owen out of the cave, where he stays for the night. Meanwhile, Heather sabotages Eve and becomes the second person to be kicked out by the team. After yelling at her former teammates and kicking Chris in the shin, Eve gets on the loser's boat. Afterward, Courtney joins her teammates in a marshmallow toast and vows that next week her team won't be in this position again. We don't believe you anymore, Courtney. Next up was Dodgeball, where Noah was kicked out. Then the talent show, where Heather set up again and kicked Justin out. And Night in the Woods. In this episode, the 2 best girlfriends were separated and Katie left the show. A new day begins right after Katie's elimination in the previous episode. The challenge here starts unexpectedly. At night in the cabin, everyone gathers to share their fears, but sneaky Chris overhears everything. Over breakfast, he tells them that each contestant will face their fears, and whoever fails will go to the boat of shame. Lashona asks if it could be worse than the breakfast they eat. After all the trials, humiliated Tyler lets a tear down on the boat of shame. A moment later, he notices that he's not alone on the boat, but with chickens, which he's so afraid of. Chris comes up with a new challenge and announces the contestants must row their canoes to Skeleton Island, carry the boats by hand through the island's dense forests, make it to the other side, build a life-saving fire, which Chris himself will evaluate, and then race back to Camp Wawanakwa. The contestants arrive on Skeleton Island, and all but Izzy are frightened by the strange fog hovering over the water and the general morbid atmosphere of the island. Along the way, both teams encounter ravenous, shaggy beavers that begin to chase the players through the swampy terrain. Then, Owen messes up his underwear and, after asking for a replacement, farts, waking up the giant geese. To get rid of all the critters on the island, they had to make the ultimate bomb. In this episode, DJ barely pulls out a victory with his efforts, and the killer geese win. After losing to the guys in past episodes, we are shown the female half on the beach. Mistrust and hostility towards each other is clearly in the air. At this point, Cody, Beth, Sadie, Courtney and Harold have already left the project. A second after that, Chris announces that the teams are disbanded and that it's every contestant for himself. However, Chris's surprises don't end there, and moments later, former Killer Perch team member Eve returns to the island. Eve declares that she will pay special attention to the team of Perch who previously voted against her. Later in the amphitheater, Chris says the next challenge will be a game of patience. Showing a masked assistant chief, Chris starts spinning the wheel of torture to choose a torture. This episode had everything, including being shot by turtles, a barrel of leeches, and even Owen's wooden underpants. At the ceremony at the campfire, Chris says there will be no souffle as it's out, which disappoints Owen. Chris goes further and says that he watched the video vote and decided to show who the contestants voted against. Here again, Eve leaves the project, but in a straitjacket. Next up was a find and destroy challenge where Trent failed, then a tricky hide and seek where Bridget flies out, and finally the mad race where each contestant assembled their own bike using materials from a pile of old spare parts, and then they all participate in dangerous motocross races. In the end, Heather, who would have thought, betrays her friend Lindsay, which leads to her expulsion. The finale of the show will not disappoint you, and there's no way you'll guess who will win, even if you've watched this animated series. The next night, the players take on a challenge where they are forced to survive a real horror movie. The episode begins with the remaining 8 campers watching a scary horror movie in which a man terrorizes his victims with a chainsaw and a hook. Duncan, Gwen and Izzy are the only ones who enjoy the movie, while DJ is horrified by the creepy scenes. Moments later, the campers see Chris and Chief, with fearful faces, get into the loser's boat with their bags and leave the island in a hurry. Owen then finds a bag left behind containing a newspaper with an article about an escaped killer with a chainsaw and hook. Chris explains that tonight's issue will be about the campers trying to survive the killer's wrath. Gwen says they need a plan of action to survive and voices the most important rule of horror movies: never walk alone. But no one listens to her. Hiding in the woods, Owen realizes that the kissing couple will be the first to be killed, but Izzy points out that they're not kissing. Later, Gwen runs into a real maniac and punches the killer several times in the face. The killer, angered by this treatment, leaves, muttering that he's treated better in prison. Chris kicks DJ out for being the most afraid and never getting to meet the killer face to face. After a group hug, he leaves the island while the killer repeatedly whispers "Total Drama Island" before complaining of a sore nose and asking if he's bleeding. The next morning, Chris explains the next mission to our heroes: to capture a wild animal and bring it back to the camp in one piece. The campers gather to draw lots to choose an animal. Owen got a chipmunk, LaShawna drew a frog, Duncan chose a raccoon, Gwen got a duck, Jeff got a beaver, Izzy got a deer, which she is very happy about, and Heather, to her disappointment, got a bear. Stating that the challenge is impossible, Heather almost leaves until Chris tells her about the punishment for failure: cleaning the shared bathrooms, which are a mess due to Owen's excessive use of breakfast paste. Heather reluctantly agrees to take on the challenge. At the bonfire ceremony, everyone sits down to receive marshmallows except for a paralyzed Heather, who is tied to a board with what is called a butt dart. Chris tosses marshmallows to Jeff, Owen, LaShawn, Duncan, and whacks one off Heather's head, leaving Gwen and Izzy last. As Chris builds up the tension, a semi-conscious Heather tells him to just give it to Gwen, which he does. Izzy graciously accepts defeat, then throws a smoke bomb on the ground and disappears. Since Heather is the only contestant left who didn't catch the animal, she's the one who has to clean the restroom. In the three-handed triathlon series, one of the most sympathetic characters, Jeff, left the show. Chris goes to the island with the already eliminated players and asks them to vote for one loser. They choose LaShawna. Passions are running high and the show's ratings are skyrocketing. We have only 4 players who will get to the end. A new day begins when the 4 campers wake up to find themselves in the middle of the woods. Since Chris is busy, Chief takes the role of host. He informs the participants that their task is to find a way out of the woods. After Chef hands them 2 bags of items they will need to complete the challenge, Duncan and Owen are put into pairs and Heather and Gwen are forced to be partners. Duncan and Owen quickly run off into the woods to hide from the girls and confuse them. They check their supplies: map, binoculars, bug spray and sleeping bag. Owen thinks everything is fine, but notices that there is no food. But Duncan stays calm, thinking they will get out of the woods quickly with the help of the night vision goggles he stole from the chief. The boys quickly check the map and Duncan thinks they are going the right way, while Owen thinks the camp is in the opposite direction. Meanwhile, the girls use the compass and head north. Heather thinks everything will be fine unless they are killed by Sasquatch. Gwen thinks it's just a story the chief made up to scare them. Later that night, Heather and Gwen try to find their things, but discover a large footprint. Thinking it's a prank, Gwen jumps into the bushes and is horrified to find herself sitting on Sasquatch, who made the print. A big chase ensues, forcing the 4 campers to take refuge in a cave full of bats that chase the campers away. Heather and Gwen admit defeat, and the boys offer to let them sleep over. In the ceremony, the chief must eliminate Duncan or Owen, but chooses the first one. Resentful but content to leave, he declares that he would be happy to return to prison. The next day, the 3 finalists are told that the show's producers have run out of ideas, and they will play I, Triple Dog, Dare You, where the eliminated competitors made their wishes. Gwen spins the bottle and it hits Lindsay. Heather calms down, thinking that Lindsay couldn't have come up with a bad idea. However, she is sorely mistaken when Chris reads aloud a card that says the chef will shave Heather's head. She is put in the barber's chair and Chef threatens her with an electric razor. When she begins to hesitate, Chris explains to her what is at stake: shave her head to stay in the game, or keep her hair and be left without $100,000. As the chief approaches, Heather knocks the razor out of his hands in a panic. The razor falls on her head and wisps of hair fly out. Heather was shocked. Only a few wisps of hair remained on her head. Although Heather has been shaved bald, Chris notes that she didn't accept the challenge and is therefore disqualified. Her scream can be heard all the way to Playa de Luzes, all the while threatening to sue Chris for everything he has and promising to ruin his reputation everywhere. Heather heads to the loser boat and leaves the island. That leaves the finalists of Drama Island as Gwen and Owen celebrate their long-awaited triumph over Heather. Welcome to the final episode. The series begins with Chris saying that this episode is the final and most dramatic episode on the show. There are 2 players, and only one of them will be win $100,000 check at the end of the day. At the campfire, Chris then announces the final challenge, the relay race that didn't make the Olympics. First, Gwen must wear a chicken hat, and Owen must wear a cow hat. They must climb a flagpole and take a flag off the top of it. Jeff worries that Owen will have a hard time with this part. Next, they have to walk a 300-meter beam over a deep gorge while holding an eagle egg. Owen notes that it's not that hard, but Chris reveals that if the contestants fall, man-eating sharks are waiting for them at the bottom. The last part of the race is a long-distance race to cross the finish line and win. And here, the show's writers did a brilliant thing. They made 2 endings. In one, Gwen wins, in the other, Owen wins. But in both versions, at the end, the runners throw Chris into the water. That's what he should do.